You have probably seen a striking blue or fawn Doberman Pinscher go viral on Instagram. But what those influencers aren't showing you is the microscopic genetic time bomb ticking inside their dog's hair follicles, a condition veterinarians call color dilution alopecia, and one that has been documented in the scientific literature for over 3 decades. Here's the thing almost nobody says out loud. Blue isn't a color, at least not the way black is a color or red is a color. Blue is what black looks like when a delivery system inside the skin has broken down, and the pigment never arrives where it was supposed to go. That gray coat isn't extra pigment, and it isn't different pigment either. It's the exact same black pigment a standard Doberman Pinscher carries, dumped in the wrong place, in the wrong quantity, in clumps too large for the hair to hold. Your eye reads the gaps between those clumps as silver, which means what you're actually looking at is a failure, photographed under a ring light and sold at a markup. In this breed, that failure has a name, a documented incidence rate, and no cure. Veterinarians call it color dilution alopecia, sometimes referred to as blue Doberman syndrome. The breeders selling these dogs rarely call it anything at all. To understand why a coat color can cost a dog its coat, you have to go down to a level most owners never think about. Not the breed and not the bloodline. A single protein doing a single job inside a single cell. When that protein stops showing up for work, everything downstream of it falls apart. Inside the skin, pigment isn't made where it's used. It's manufactured in one place and delivered to another, and that gap is where this entire story lives. The factories are called melanocytes, specialized cells that sit at the base of the hair follicle. Their only job is to produce melanin, package it into tiny sealed containers called melanosomes, and hand those containers off to the cells that are actively building the hair shaft. Picture a loading dock at the bottom of every single hair on the dog's body, running around the clock. But a melanosome can't make that trip alone. It has to be carried to the outer edge of the cell, and the cell moves it using a relay of 3 proteins working as a single unit. First is Rab27A, which sits on the surface of the melanosome itself, like a handle bolted to a crate. Second is myosin 5A, a motor protein that walks along the cell's internal scaffolding hauling cargo, and it's the thing that actually generates movement. The third protein is the one this video is about, and it's called melanophilin. Melanophilin doesn't make pigment, and it doesn't move pigment. It's the coupling, the piece that physically links the handle on the crate to the motor that pulls it. Take away melanophilin, and nothing else in the system is broken, the factory still runs, the pigment is still perfect, and the motor still works. But the cargo is never hitched to it, so the crates just sit on the dock. In the Doberman Pinscher, one small change to a single gene is enough to take melanophilin away. So the crates pile up, and that's when a color problem quietly becomes a medical one. When melanosomes can't be distributed evenly, they don't stay small and separate. They collect near the center of the cell and fuse together into oversized masses, and pathologists call these macromelanosomes, giant pigment granules, boulders where there should have been sand. 2 things follow from that, and they happen at the same time. The first is the color. Melanin only looks black when it's spread out in fine, dense, evenly distributed particles across the hair. Clump that same pigment into a handful of large deposits, and you leave enormous stretches of hair with nothing in them at all. Light passes through the empty regions and scatters, so your eye averages the dark boulders against the clear gaps and reports back a single answer: silver, steel, blue. Nothing was added to make that dog blue, which means something was taken away and badly stacked. The second consequence is the one that costs the dog. Those macromelanosomes don't sit politely off to the side. They get built directly into the growing hair shaft, embedded in the cortex and the medulla like gravel packed into a drinking straw. And a hair shaft isn't designed to carry passengers because it's a keratin tube whose entire structural integrity depends on being uniform. So it fails. As the hair pushes up and emerges from the skin, the shaft fractures at the points where those pigment clumps are lodged. Not the root and not the follicle, but the hair itself, breaking apart on the way out, snapping off at the surface before it ever reaches full length. Under a microscope, veterinary dermatologists see exactly this, and it's unmistakable. Enormous melanin granules trapped inside the shafts, free clumps of pigment floating loose in the follicle openings, and crowded around the follicles themselves, melanophages, immune cells whose job is to come clean up pigment that has escaped where it doesn't belong. That's a body responding to debris, which is precisely what this is. The dog isn't shedding. The dog's hair is being destroyed from the inside by its own coloring. The gene behind all of this is melanophilin, written MLPH, and in dog genetics, it sits at what breeders call the D locus, the D standing for dilution. It's recessive, and that word matters more than almost anything else in this story. A dog needs 2 broken copies, one from each parent, before any of this becomes visible, which means a completely normal-looking black Doberman Pinscher with a flawless coat and no symptoms of any kind can carry this and pass it to every litter it ever produces without a single person knowing. In 2007, a team led by Cord Drogemuller and Tosolib at the University of Bern-Suisse Suisse faculty found the first one. It wasn't even in a part of the gene that codes for protein. It was a single letter change sitting at a splice site, the junction the cell uses to edit the genetic message before building anything from it. Corrupt that junction and the message gets assembled incorrectly, and the amount of working melanophilin the cell can produce collapses. One letter, and that's the entire mutation. Geneticists label it D1, and it wasn't found in Dobermans alone. The same research identified the variant in the German Pinscher, the Doberman's sibling breed in the same Pinscher family, reinforcing that this defect is written into the shared genetic ancestry of the group. For about a decade, that looked like the answer, except it wasn't, because dogs kept showing up dilute while testing completely clear, visibly gray animals whose genetic test insisted they should have been black. So in 2018, a second variant was identified, labeled D2. And in 2020, Van Buren and colleagues identified a third, called D3. That one is a frame shift, and frame shifts are brutal. A single extra letter gets inserted, and every instruction after that point is read out of alignment, like a sentence where every word is shifted one space over. The cell hits a premature stop signal and quits early, so the protein is never finished. 3 separate mutations, 3 separate ways to break the same coupling, all producing the same washed-out coat, all discovered over 13 years, and all of them still recessive, which is why buyers get blindsided. 2 dogs with perfect coats can meet, and the math still delivers a litter carrying a defect neither parent ever displayed. And here is something worth pausing on. Other breeds carry dilution genes without developing this condition at anywhere near the same rate. Weimaraners and Great Danes both carry the D locus mutation and produce dilute coats, yet color dilution alopecia is far less prevalent in those populations. This is what geneticists call incomplete penetrance. The same broken gene expressing itself differently depending on whatever else is in the genome around it. It also explains why leaden mice, which carry an MLPH mutation of their own, show diluted coat color without developing alopecia. The failure of the hair shaft in dogs is not an automatic consequence of the mutation. It's a consequence of that mutation running inside this particular genetic background. In the Doberman Pinscher, something about the rest of the genome makes the follicle uniquely unable to cope. We've known how often the coat actually fails since 1990. A veterinary dermatologist named William Miller at Cornell University College of Veterinary Medicine studied a population of 57 blue and fawn Doberman Pinschers for exactly this question, and 42 of them had hair loss, broken down by color, that landed at roughly 58% of the blue dogs and close to 90% of the fawns. 9 out of 10 fawn Dobermans losing their coats. Puppies are born looking fine, and that's part of what makes this so cruel. The hair loss typically begins somewhere between 6 months and 3 years of age, usually starting along the spine, and it tends to spare the head, tail, and legs. The rust markings stay perfect because rust was never diluted. Only the gray goes. What's left underneath is skin that runs dry and scaly, burns easily in sun, handles cold poorly, and keeps developing bacterial infections in the empty follicles. There's no cure, none. No treatment restores the coat. Because the follicle isn't diseased in the ordinary sense, it's manufacturing a defective product exactly as instructed. In one published case, a 6-year-old blue Doberman was treated with oral melatonin for 3 months. Nothing. Which brings us back to that word, rare. Blue and fawn aren't rare. They're 2 of the 4 colors the American Kennel Club has always accepted in this breed, sitting in the written standard alongside black and red. Anyone charging a premium for rarity is charging you for a recessive defect that has been documented in the veterinary literature for 36 years. And the world's largest kennel federation looked at the same evidence and drew the opposite conclusion. In 1994, the FCY stopped accepting dilute Dobermans altogether. 2 registries, 1 dog, and one of them flinched. The coat that made that dog go viral is the same coat it will spend its life losing. Not because it was bred badly by accident, but because somebody was paid extra for a broken delivery truck and called it rare.